This is Infosec Decoded number 79, Heterologous Vaccinations. So I'm starting with the Constitution Dao, of course. The Constitution Dao, they wanted to form a group of people on Ethereum that would all pool their money to buy the copy of the Constitution, but they planned it incredibly badly. So it was a total disaster. Not only did they not actually bother to decide how they were going to give people shares of any money they created in tokens, they didn't decide how they were going to have anybody vote on making decisions. So really just a couple of founders made all the decisions. And then they put it on the Ethereum blockchain instead of somewhere sensible like Solana. So the transaction fees were like $100. So people that wanted to donate $100 had to pay $200 for $100 to be gone in the transaction fee. Then they had a public chat room to discuss it. They said, okay, we have $40 million, so $40 million will be our absolute bid. So some guy just read that and came in and bid like $1 higher and took it. Because in an auction, you can't announce what your top bid is. And now that they've completely failed to get the Constitution, everyone's now asking, well, how do we get our money back? And the answer is you can't, of course, because sending it back to you, the transaction fee would consume all the money you sent. So you're pretty much hosed. The only way you'll ever make any money is on this new token, and we never actually figured that out yet or anything. So anyway, there are some people saying this proves that DAOs are great, and other people are saying this proves that Ethereum is trash, and there's great suffering and crying. So it's kind of fun as long as you didn't invest in it. And I remember I noticed the same thing years ago when I got some CryptoKitties. I couldn't even send them to students after a while because the Ethereum blockchain froze up. Now, Ethereum is supposedly going to implement sharding, which is the solution for this, which is why I've been using Radix in class for years, because Radix is sharded, so this won't happen. But they haven't got it going yet. But presumably in a couple of years, they will improve the Ethereum blockchain so it can actually handle enough transactions without a ridiculous cost. Anyway, then Kaitlyn has found something wrong with Facebook.
Yeah, imagine that. Something is going on with Facebook and no one is quite sure why this is. Actually, we do know why this is now. So the Insider has an article called, I'm not going to read the full title, but it's about how researchers wanted to block hate speech on Facebook. But a few conservative partners at Facebook said, "Niet, no, you're not going to do this." So this is an article written by Katie Canales on the Insider. And basically what happened is that Facebook wanted to start a research project and they wanted to look at hate speech on their network. So they put together this team and they made sure to include everyone. So they included typical users, left-leaning people, as well as conservative partners. And so they showed them a bunch of really offensive images and stuff that was on Facebook. And they wanted to, create an algorithm that would take it down. And what ended up happening is that the algorithm started to kind of take down what it considered the worst of the worst, focusing on hate speech towards white people, which is that's not that, not hate speech toward people of color or minorities, but white people, what's going on. So they decided to update the project so that it would be tweaked so that hate speech against Black, Jewish, LGBTQ, Muslim, etc., would be taken down automatically. But right-wing partners had a conniption about this and said that you can't take down our hate speech because it's an expression of opinion. And apparently Facebook sided with the conservative partners. So instead of creating, and so they were essentially, Facebook was poised between creating a safe space for conservatives or a safe space for targeted minority groups. And Facebook essentially decided conservatives are who we're going to create this safe space for. And that is why Facebook is oftentimes full of, content that's questionable, and why a lot of people of color and other minority groups feel unsafe and have left Facebook.
Yeah, and I know the top 10 posts on Facebook are almost always Ben Shapiro. It's essentially a paid commercial advertising for right-wing stuff. But that's why our whole society is splitting over this. A lot of companies would just like to stay out of politics and sell to both the right and the left, and that's just becoming increasingly impossible. You can't please one without irritating the other.
Well, it's not just that. Facebook had a choice, right? That they were going to alienate they were either going to allow hate speech, but then keep the racists, or disallow hate speech, keep the minorities, but then make the racists go away. And they decided that the racists were who they were going to side with. And so you need to keep that in mind. This is part of what Facebook is. This is Facebook's values. So,
well, they're going for the side with more money.
Yes,
which is a sensible business decision in the old principle of corporate business, where money is the only thing that matters. And I think anybody has any doubts that money is the only thing that matters, that Facebook and Microsoft is not paying attention. That's their whole thing.
Right.
Anyway, so Irvin, the fingerprint hacking.
The fingerprint hacking. This short little step-by-step method is how you can use fingerprints to get into things. Very simply take a picture of a fingerprint that's left somewhere, anywhere. Spend about an hour on Photoshop getting a decent negative out of that picture. Print it on an acetate sheet with a laser printer. Put wood glue on top of that so that the fingerprint transfers, and now you're ready to go.
I remember they did it with silly putty and stuff before.
Yeah, with silly putty, anything that will take that, that'll take that form and shape. This is just showing that biometrics should not be the one and only way to get into stuff, because it's very easy to break.
On Twitter, somebody said they could just use their dog's paw and it worked. So I wonder if the sensitivity of those fingerprint readers is turned way down. The one on my Mac drives me nuts because it doesn't work very often. So, I bet if you get tired of a tech support, you just lower the sensitivity to down where it'll take practically anything.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a good thing to know. Fingerprints are not as perfect as they seem like in police procedurals when implemented on computers.
Yeah. My big issue with fingerprint scanners on like Apple devices or any high quality fingerprint scanners is that the second my skin becomes moist, because I do not have dry skin, let's put it that way, fingerprint scanners no longer work.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, mine, I don't find they work very well for me at all. Yeah. The one on my M1 seems to work, but the one on my MacBook Intel just fails so often I gave up using it. Anyway, and Alan has got the COVID surge.
I am sorry for being the bearer of bad news, but COVID never left and it's coming back again. This is going to be the 5th wave in the US and it's not looking good.
Record travel, right? Everybody's packing into airplanes and stuff.
That's right. AAA is forecasting a return to pre-pandemic levels of travel for Thanksgiving and probably Christmas after that. And so we're looking at a lot of people out and about, rubbing shoulders, breathing each other's air. And since so many people are unvaccinated, and since Delta is so contagious, that almost certainly means a lot of people are going to be getting infected. And Europe has historically been a good predictor of what will happen in the US. After all, remember that it was in northern Italy where there was the first big spread with a lot of deaths outside of China. And so it looks like the same thing is happening again in Europe right now, to the extent that Austria is going on a full lockdown. And Austria has a higher full vaccination level than the US. 65% of the population in Austria has been fully vaccinated. Only 60% of the US population has been fully vaccinated. So if it can be so bad there, and they're going through their worst outbreak yet for the whole pandemic, if it can be so bad there with just 35% of the population unvaccinated. It's going to be even worse here in the US, probably.
Probably. You see regional differences. I suppose it has to do with the weather and your culture and stuff.
Right, that's a good point. It seems like the worst of the outbreaks right now is in the northern states, where of course it's colder. And meanwhile, in the southern states, like Florida, the situation's considerably better because now the weather's milder and people can be outside. They don't need air conditioning there.
Yeah, yeah. All right. And so it hasn't gone up too much yet, but it's probably going to go up a lot because of Thanksgiving and Christmas, right?
Right, it's trending upwards. It's definitely trending upwards. And actually, there are a couple of forces at work right now. First of all, winter, people relaxing their behavior, their vigilance, and also what was I going to say? Well,
weather, yeah, weather.
There are multiple forces at work.
Yeah, yeah. All right. And so I've got the article about the QAnon JFK cult, where these people think JFK is going to rise from the dead. And the amazing thing here is they got stories here from people. This is like a drug addiction. There's people who were completely normal, and then they went on YouTube, and like 3 weeks later, they've abandoned their wife and their family, gone to Dallas to wait for JFK to rise from the dead. They won't talk about anything else. They no longer care about anyone. People are like divorcing. One she grew up her whole life with her sister, her best friend, but her sister went into this cult and she said she's gone and I don't think she'll ever come back. And now the leader of this cult, there's a QAnon prophet named Brian Protzman, who is the guy predicting that JFK is going to rise from the dead in Dallas. And now he has started making videos saying, you know, in order to achieve spiritual purity, we have to first die. So it sounds like he's going to turn this into a death cult. And experts in cults say, just like experts in bad marriages say, when you get down to physical violence, that's when you should call in the cops, shut the thing down, drag people out by force. That's when it's going to get horrible, because the next logical thing is get them all to poison themselves like Jim Jones, which happens. Right now, he's at the early stages where he predicts that JFK is coming out next week, but he doesn't come. So he predicts next week and next week. But at some point, he'll have to up the emotional compulsion here to make people feel like they're doing something awesome. And their friends and family are calling him and saying, well, you just come home and knock this off. And they say, no, I'm waiting because something awesome is going to happen. It's a troubling time in America that this stuff is so connected to politics. We've always had crazy cults and crazy death cults, but they haven't been this popular and this connected to a major political party. So I don't know. It's good to document it so people know what's happening. But once somebody you know falls into this stuff, there's usually no getting them back. They're going to spend their life living in a fantasy world until something inside them changes, I think. I've done all this years and years ago. I've been in crazy Christian groups like this that were real extreme, and then it sort of collapsed and I came out, you know, but the one thing is they didn't keep us isolated. That's a big thing. That's why you have to talk about it all the time. One essential part of all cult groups is to break all your connections with friends and family on the outside. So you only hear stuff on the inside. If you keep friendships outside, then that's usually a way to leave. Anyway.
Right. And you see this a lot in cults like the Latter-day Saints, where if what they'll do is they'll excommunicate members of their group that question, so that if you have someone in there that's sort of like, you know, maybe this isn't a good idea, they basically disavow anyone from talking to them and they're completely kicked out. And, you know, they, you know, tell people to stay away from family members that question their beliefs, et cetera, et cetera. So this is very common, even in quote unquote mainstream cults, to isolate.
Well, one thing about the big ones like the Latter-day Saints or the Jehovah's Witnesses or Seventh-day Adventists is once you get big enough, then you cannot be as crazy and dangerous. Like you cannot be telling people to all drink poison and die anymore. So you become more tolerable. And it used to be that basically every church would tell you all the other people are all going to hell. That's pretty much gone out of fashion. There's not even any hell in Catholicism anymore. As religions get older, they get more tolerant. Like Buddhism is thousands of years old, and they don't yell at you for not being Buddhist. Nobody cares. They're totally over that nonsense. I think Christianity will get there in about another 1,000 years. Anyway, so NASA wants to put a nuke on the moon.
Yes, there's very little information about this. We don't really know what's going on. So if basically Motherboard Vice has an article written by Audrey Carlton talking about how NASA has put out a call for plans to put a nuclear reactor on the moon within a decade. So we do these things within a decade, not because it is easy, but because we get nukes on the moon.
Why do you need a nuke on the moon? Why can't you use solar power or something?
Well, the idea, and this is explicitly laid out in the plan here, is that they want a power production facility on the moon that is not solar. So it'll work in all places on the moon. Now, keep in mind that the moon has very long days, very literally every day is a month. So you're going to spend a month in darkness. So solar is sometimes not really an option. And so NASA is now looking for people to put nuclear power plants on the moon. Now, what goes through my mind immediately is, how do we get this nuclear material to the moon safely? Because if rockets blow up, and they oftentimes do, you don't want nuclear material going everywhere. But I suppose we've already put large amounts of plutonium in a lot of our deep space probes, which is how they're powered. And there hasn't been any issue. So I assume that's not too big of an issue. I imagine the people at NASA are smart enough not to irradiate the planet by accident during a liftoff. But yeah, no, NASA wants to throw up some nukes on the moon for nuclear power because science.
Yeah, yeah. Is this so they can support people on the moon, or just for equipment?
Equipment.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway. And then Irvin has got WordPress sites breached.
Yes, WordPress sites have been breached this week, not that long ago. And all of them were hosted on GoDaddy. This exposure happened as far back as they realized September 6th. They realized it recently, and they filed with the SEC to say, hey, 1.2 million active and inactive accounts were hit by this.
I saw another article where they said they had your password in plain text that was stolen too.
Yeah, I saw that too.
You know, WordPress has the ability to hash passwords, but apparently their portal kept a plain text copy.
That's just bad configuration, but oh well.
That's GoDaddy for you.
Yeah. Those of you with GoDaddy and WordPress should have gotten an email or something from them by now.
Yeah. Well, I think they forced password resets for whatever good that does, because they've been in there long enough to install more malware and stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is what's thing in CPTC. You change your password, but you're already owned. So the bad guy's watching you type in the new password. So what's the point of that? Yeah. That's why I've been getting into the zero knowledge proofs. This is why our current login system makes no sense. You should not send your password to a server, but then compares it to your stored password. Instead, your server should ask you, do you know the password? And you should send a ZK snark, which is a cryptographic primitive to prove that you know the password without ever sending it to the server. The technology exists for that. We're just not using it. Anyway.
It sounds interesting.
I know. That's why these zero knowledge things are bloody awesome. You can answer just the question without handing over a whole bunch of extra unnecessary data. Yeah. All right. And anyway, so Alan has got the heterologous boosters. It sounds like a swear word from some foreign language. Anyway.
I had to practice this word. My understanding is the correct pronunciation is oh, now I've forgotten.
I don't imagine I'm getting it right.
Yes. But anyways, the point is you have to, according to these studies, it's become clear that 2 doses of either the Pfizer or the AstraZeneca or the Moderna is not enough. And that after 6 months, antibody levels decline significantly. Which is not to say that the vaccines then become worthless. That's not true. They still do have some protective effect. However, one is more likely to get infected. The consequences of that infection will be less severe, but that's still an infection, which is bad because then, of course, that person can then spread it on. So it's become clear that doing a third dose is a very good idea, as you have been advocating for, Sam. Yes, this is now really borne out by multiple studies. And one recent study that's just a preprint from the NIH shows that the best way to go about getting a booster is if you have, say, your first 2 shots were of Pfizer, then you should get a shot of Moderna as the booster, because that will increase the protection by over 17 times. If you previously got 2 shots of the Moderna, then you should get a shot of the Pfizer, because that's more effective. And if you previously got a shot of Johnson & Johnson, you should get a booster of Moderna. And what's clear is that with these boosters, not only does it restore you to the antibody levels of just the 2 shots, but it actually takes the antibody levels well beyond that. So it really is enhancing the immune response well beyond just the 2 shots. So even though the CDC has been providing very unclear advice to people, the reality is that getting that booster shot is a very good idea. And it's now available to everyone who's 18 or older and got their shots more than 6 months ago.
Yeah, good, good. Yeah, everybody should go get a booster.
Yes, public service announcement, get your booster.
Yep. All right. And let's see, then we're back up here to, right, you can now, Linux kernel now includes an NTFS driver. So that means you can install Linux on the same partition as Windows if you want to, because Linux will have different folders like /dev and /etc than Windows. So you can have Linux and Windows in the same file system and just boot to different places if you're completely insane, of course, without even virtual machines or separate disks or anything. They have some other bizarre things you can do here, which are probably a really bad idea. But the other thing that makes more sense is if you have data on a separate volume, you could format it NTFS, and now you could see that data from both the Linux and the Windows boot. They're not using incompatible file systems anymore. Anyway, it's kind of fun. And I've actually used some of these products that do this, put Linux right on top of Windows and stuff. And of course, you create an unholy mess. And as soon as you update one of them, it destroys the other and so on. Now I use separate virtual machines. But anyway, it's good to see NTFS finally make it in Windows. I remember I taught a Net Plus course like 15 years ago, and we used Red Hat, and there was no NTFS driver at all. And you had, if you go to the page in the manual, it said, we don't know how to write one. If you know, please write one and submit it to us. I said, you know, if you pay for your software, you don't find pages in the manual that look like that. And there were experimental drivers that could read but not write. And it said, if you use this, you may destroy your disk, use it at your own risk, and encouraging things like that. Anyway, they finally made a good NTFS driver. All right, and then Kaitlyn has got robot servers.
Right, so The Insider has an article written by Grace Steen talking about how restaurants are turning to robotic servers because they can't find enough people to work there, which is the exact right move to do. If you can't find workers, you should automate it so that you can still run your business. And this is something that I've been kind of warning about for a while in a good way. Basically, there are basically 3 sections of the economy. You have agriculture, you have industry, and you have service. And agriculture has been automated. So everyone moved to industry. And then industry has been largely automated. So most people have moved to service. And that's really the only part of our economy that mass employs people nowadays, is this service economy. So service includes things like waiters, secretaries, lawyers, doctors, that kind of thing. And we're beginning to see the automation of service parts of our economy. And we're seeing this through the use of automated waiters. And actually, we've seen this before, Sam. Remember when we went to that hotel in Berkeley and they had the automated robot staff?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and by the way, this is great for hackers because now we have a whole new suite of devices that we can hack, like hack your server. That's awesome. But the robot comes out, it's like, stay there for a second. Let me Wi-Fi for a second. But we're already seeing, automated service guards or security guards. We're seeing automated servers in restaurants, and they only cost, and I say only, about $20,000, which if you compare to a human worker is far cheaper, far cheaper. Now, are they as good as a human worker right now? Probably not. They probably can't handle weird stuff going on, and they probably drop food and don't even realize what's happening. And I imagine there's a bunch of bugs that need to be worked out, but you can get them for under $20,000, and they'll go around and staff your restaurant. And we're going to see them a lot more as people don't want to work in restaurants and get abused, which is good for them. But this is ultimately going to lead to an economy where there's just not going to be enough jobs as we start automating everything. So we'll start having to work on a post-scarcity economy where people won't be forced into a job that they don't like in order to survive. So
They shall lounge around eating peeled grapes and writing poetry.
I imagine the poetry part is probably more apt than the lounging around and eating grapes, but yes.
It's science fiction, right? The decadent society where the robots do all the work and the people live like nobility dancing the minuet and stuff.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of criticisms about capitalism, and I have criticisms against capitalism, communism, and socialism, and that they all reduce human lives to essentially portions of labor. So in capitalism, you say, well, the rich people own capital, and you make yourself useful in this by servicing your labor to the rich people's capital. In socialism, you say, well, having the rich people own all the capital can be problematic. Let's have the state own some of the capital. And same thing, the workers then just work for the states instead of the private interests. And then in communism, they say, well, instead of having the state own, let's all own, everything together and sort of work together in a sort of utopian future that hasn't really worked on a large scale yet, but whatever. But still, your life is sort of reduced to this dialectical materialism where you are what you produce and so on and so forth. Anyway, my main gripe is that life is more than just what you produce or what you can do to add value or monetary or economic value to society at large. And there are a lot of artists out there, a lot of people who would be great pianists, who would be great at just being social activists, who would be great at keeping local parks up, or making the streets safer, that can't because they're not profitable, right? So no one's willing to pay for this stuff or pay the cost of it. And so they're forced into labor that increases their economic worth, but doesn't necessarily make life worth living. Especially in capitalist societies, we have these things called bullshit jobs, which is the technical term, where people essentially are employed, but they're not entirely sure why, and they spend their lives, doing sort of bureaucratic things here and there. And,
it's like college administrators.
Like college administrators, yeah. And it's time we start moving past that. So anyway, that's just my hot take on economies.
Yeah, well, I think it was all expressed by the great philosopher Woody Allen. In capitalism, man oppresses man, but in communism, the situation is reversed. Anyway, so then Irvin has got Black Friday.
Speaking of being capitalist, and American, Black Friday is here.
It's coming like in 3 or 4 days, right?
Yep. So this person put up all the deals that they can find, and also is accepting anybody who can find more. So you got things like newsletters, tools, course trainings, some mini course bundles, hardware, clothing, books, services, all kinds of stuff if you are interested in some techie Black Friday sales.
Yep. Well, good.
Homework.
All right. And Alan has got new chips, new ARM chips.
From Qualcomm, no less. Qualcomm is trying to break into the desktop PC CPU space again. I should say desktop and laptops. And they have recently acquired a small development house called Nuvia, which was co-founded by some ex-Apple A-series CPU developers, engineers. And so they're teasing, Qualcomm is, they're teasing the eventual rollout of a new line of desktop CPUs. When? Well, we'll have to wait and find out. And of course, we'll have to wait for the silicon manufacturing facilities to open up a bit too. But it would be interesting to have yet another viable competitor in the desktop CPU space, because Intel for the longest time had an effective monopoly, and then AMD came up, kind of revived itself. So it was somewhat less of a monopoly. And of course, Apple more recently with the M1s have really cracked open the field, but that's only for Apple devices. And now if Qualcomm is able to get in on this, that would be an interesting addition. They've tried and failed in the past, but with this Nuvia acquisition, perhaps they'll have better luck this time. And I think it'll be good for everybody concerned. Greater competition, better performance, lower prices. It'll be interesting to see what comes of it. It will be an ARM CPU. So it looks like there's a trend right here. It looks like there's definitely a trend towards RISC CPUs.
Yeah, another thing I saw was Qualcomm's deal that Windows on ARM can only run on Qualcomm is expiring, which I was not aware of, but I am aware you can't run Windows on the M1. And that's apparently why. It's a legal restriction, which is now ending.
Oh, well, that would be very interesting. I wonder if Amazon or Apple would consider licensing.
Yeah, I assume something like that is going to happen. Right now, apparently you can run Windows virtual machines on the M1 in parallels, but it's doing something like emulating an Intel or something. But that's why I thought I'd have to use my private cloud for everything. Now, apparently I could put a Windows virtual machine on my M1 if I wanted to, but I haven't been motivated to do it yet. I think the cloud.
I wonder if there's a special deal for parallels for Black Friday.
I wonder if there is. One thing I learned is that Parallels uses really miserable disk encryption. But anyway, I don't think anybody cares, but they have an interesting encryption protocol, and there's 3 of them. And Parallels is a million times or 1,000 times weaker than VMware, which is 1,000 times weaker than VirtualBox. VirtualBox is bloody awesome. 1.2 million cycles of hashing. Anyway. All right, well, that's it for this one. And it is Tuesday, so we will be back Friday, I reckon, unless the gang decides that they've had too much turkey and decides not to do it on Friday.
Or we're out Black Friday shopping.
Something like
I would avoid that if you value your sanity and livelihoods and health.
that. Yes.
What
Well, yeah,
sanity?
I would do the shopping online. I mean, I tried to go to the grocery store like last week, and then I remembered why I never go there during Christmas. Holy crap. There's crazy people everywhere. And
Yeah.
the closer you get to Christmas, the more grouchy and desperate they are driving in to find a last minute gift or something.
Speaking of which, I have to host Thanksgiving at my place this year.
Oh.
And I could use some ideas for Thanksgiving dinner since I have to buy stuff tomorrow.
Well, there's this big bird that everybody eats.
The thing is, it's going to be small this year. It's just going to be like 2 or 3 people. So I don't want to cook an entire turkey. And in fact, I don't like turkey. So since it's my Thanksgiving, I'm going to avoid turkey this year.
That's like saying I don't like avocado in California. What's wrong with you?
I mean, it's doesn't taste that great. I mean, it's not even as good as chicken. Anyway, It's definitely not bad. It's just not, I don't know. To be honest, I'd rather eat pizza. Like a really good deep dish pizza for Thanksgiving. That'd be much tastier than turkey.
There you go. I think especially you should do something bizarre. I think it would be in character.
Yeah, no, I should do something fun. But I mean, I already found something. So instead of regular bread, I found the recipe for the biscuits they give you at Red Lobster.
Ah,
So I'm making those,
good.
which would be freaking awesome. And then of course I'm having hors d'oeuvres and everything like that. I couldn't find any good caviar right now. I don't know what's going on with that, but whatever. But I'm still looking for a main course, and I'm thinking either I'll just whip something up. Maybe we'll have a Thanksgiving fish, or I will do like Uber Eats the night before, and then be like, hey, I got lobster from someplace, and I don't know, but I'm looking for ideas. So if anyone has Thanksgiving things I like, or anyone?
I know nothing. Food I'm very primitive about.
Yeah.
Same. I normally don't host. I normally just show up to eat.
Yeah, no, the thing is, yeah, I mean, I'm so busy. I don't do a ton of cooking. I used to cook a lot, so I know how to. So I don't have things like mixers. I don't have like a blender. I don't have a lot of stuff that would be really good for a Thanksgiving meal. Which I should have thought about that before, but now it's too late. So I just have to be creative.
So you'll be one of those crazy people zipping around the mall trying to buy things through the throng.
Yeah, I guess. Tomorrow, what I'll probably do is schedule a trip to the grocery store tomorrow morning when it's less likely to be super crowded.
Yeah.
We'll see how that works.
Have fun.
Okay.